Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to EMA's first Global Folk Managers Meetup. My name is Michelle Ronquillo, and I'm EMA's event manager. EMA unites music managers organization across 13 European countries, which represent more than 2,000 managers across Europe. Our mission is to strengthen European managers globally through the Empower program, which encompasses education, advocacy, networking, and research. If you want to know more and stay up to date with the upcoming events, please visit our website, subscribe to our mailing list, join our WhatsApp group. You can find the links in the chat later on. And just a couple of housekeeping instructions that after the session, there will be a survey which will help us a lot if you complete it. It takes 2 minutes and it will just give us more information about the things that are working or things that you would like to see more in these events. Also, there is managers collaborating contact list that is I'm going to put in the chat as well. That is just basically where you can fill up your information if you want to be contacted by other managers, then just to let the magic happen. And also at the end of the session, we will have breakout rooms. So once the conversation is finished, I will let you know that the networking breakout rooms will start. So to give you a little bit of time to decide if you want to stay or you want to leave. But yeah, I'm going to bring the agenda of the day up. So today we are welcoming Terry O'Brien, agent and owner from Playpen agency, and it's going to be the conversation is going to be moderated by Kerry Harvey-Piper, which is founder of Red Grape Music and also part of the Folk and Global Steering Committee from EMA. And yeah, without further ado, over to you, Kerry, and thank you all for being here.
Hello. Sorry, Michelle. Oh, that's brilliant, because I just want to have Terry on my screen. Sorry, I'm just doing the there we go. Now I can see Terry. Hello, Terry.
Hello.
Thank you so much for agreeing to do this, because you've got such a vast experience both throughout the industry. So it's a real pleasure to have you here. Just before you and I start chatting, can we just have a very quick show of hands from everybody on this meeting as to who is already working with an agent? Have a quick look. Okay. Yeah. That's quite a number of you. And who out of you is doing the booking for your artists yourself? Okay, so there's some hands which are going up twice there. Okay, so that's quite interesting, because I think in folk and folk roots global, I think we are all probably wearing multiple hats. So talking of multiple hats, Terry, can you just give us a brief rundown of your career to date? And the roles that you've held in the industry so far. I say so far.
Yeah, exactly. Sure. I started out as an assistant to a mainstream artist manager in central London, ended up working for his management clients and running training for the MMF for young managers, and then moved to work for Peter Jenner, who I'm sure many of you know, doing day-to-day management for Eddie Reader at that point and helping with Billy Bragg's career. And then set up on my own in 2003 as an artist manager. But probably about 3-4 years later, as the industry was changing, it was very difficult the deals that were used to be on the table for artist managers where you were basically working towards getting a cost of an advance that was imminent, that sort of really changed. And at that point, I chose to sort of move sideways into agency and started working more as an agent partly also because one of my artists had been with an agent who just hadn't done the job, and I took them back and thought, okay, I'll give it a go, I'll do it. And at that point, I became an agent and have been ever since. And I'm primarily working as an agent, but I do kind of offer my management experience with overall career strategy almost as a sort of added extra to the agency that I do for my artists.
And again, that's a perfect example of multiple hats, and a lot of the kind of the jobs that we do are blurring from one area to another. So in the kind of the mainstream industry, I think the roles of manager and agent are fairly defined. I mean, I think, do you want to comment on that? Because I think then it helps to draw the real sort of differences between what happens in some of the more mainstream genres to what happens in the genres which most of us are working in.
Sure. I mean, when I was working in mainstream music, the way that it was always described to me is that it's like a wheel with spokes, and the artist and the manager sit in the middle of the wheel, and everybody else in the team are spokes on the wheel. So the artist and manager are, you know, the manager is almost acting as the artist a lot of the time and should be representing them perfectly in what they want. They should be in, you know, perfect harmony about that. And then the manager should be instructing the rest of the team on branding, career strategy, direction, and everybody else should be feeding back into the center and making sure everybody's on the same page. That's how it was always described to me, and certainly that's how I saw it work in mainstream music when it worked well.
Working well being the operative word, of course.
Exactly.
So
yeah, but sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, so how does what we do and where we all work, how do you think that relationship is different to the mainstream?
Well, when I moved across into folk music, it was a very particular artist that I discovered while doing an Arts Council project, who was a folk artist, but quite a sort of revolutionary folk artist, who drew me into folk music because I took him on, and he became my first folk artist. And at that point, it was really a sort of voyage of discovery about what was going on in the folk world, and that, you know, a broad definition of folk world, everything from, you know, traditional to acoustic pop. It is quite, you know, I consider it quite a broad definition. But there was definitely at that point, which was the early 2000s, there was very much a lack of management expertise in that genre. And I saw that as an opportunity, to be honest. That there was work to be done in strategizing careers and kind of moving careers forward that possibly wasn't happening as much because there was a lot of people were, you know, it was members of their family who were looking after their administration and their careers. They weren't people who'd gone through, you know, music management degrees. So it's definitely moved on since then, but that's kind of where I came in. Since then, I think there's a lot more management expertise come in, but we're still challenged by the finances of our genre, that you know, we are not filling stadiums on the whole. So the money that is there that has to be divided between managers and agents is still, you know, it's relatively small amounts compared with the mainstream industry. Hence, a lot of people are wearing multiple hats. Managers are agents, agents are managers a lot of the time.
So do you think it's just financial, the constraints of the financial, or do you think it's that folk and global, I'm going to say folk just for ease of speaking about it. Do you think a lot of it is that perhaps it's been seen as a less professional genre up until this point? And so therefore it's been very much word of mouth. People have been making it up as they go along. You know, it's kind of, there's a kind of small community and everybody's helping each other out.
Well, I really hope that in the mainstream music, people are helping each other out. I live in hope. But I think that it's difficult to generalize, because obviously there are always people who are really amazing in any area of music. But yes, in general, certainly, you know, late 90s, early 2000s, there were less people who had a professional background in music working in folk and global areas, in my experience. That has changed slightly, but we're still, you know, I don't think we're ever going to get to where mainstream music is. And I do think that the primary driver in that is finance.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you say that. I mean, from a personal experience, coming in and starting to manage an artist who'd had a career all the way through and had a lifetime career in folk, when I started coming in and talking management, you know, the response was, well, that would be amazing, but nobody's ever done that for us before. And so even just so much as kind of thinking beyond the next 6 months, thinking beyond the next year came as quite a shock. So I think perhaps because there isn't that tradition of folk artists being managed through, you know, from a fairly early stage in their career, I think quite possibly agents and managers come on board perhaps at a slightly later point in folk artists' careers than they would in, say, pop or rock, metal, whatever. Do you think that is broadly true?
I think so. It's a while since I worked in sort of mainstream rock and indie. Certainly at that point, everybody was moving quite quickly and expecting record deals to come through quite quickly. So they were grabbing artists at a very early age, you know, age and stage in their career when possibly not very much was happening, but they just saw potential. I think that has changed an awful lot. And now in the mainstream industry, they are probably coming in later than we would in folk and global, because in the mainstream industry, everybody's just going, what are your numbers? And, you know, if your numbers aren't in the millions, they're not looking at you.
Yeah.
So I think it is very different.
Yeah, that's interesting what you say about numbers. I mean, I've noticed that when I look at numbers for a folk artist, you kind of go, well, certainly within a more mainstream genres, people would not even pay the slightest bit of attention to the numbers that we're looking at when we step in to manage an artist. Okay, so because we're trying to really get down to the nub in this conversation of the ideal relationship between a manager and an agent, how have you got a kind of a list of the best ways? It's like what would be your blueprint? You know, if I said to you, Terry, what sort of relationship would you like to have with a manager for one of your artists? What's your top 3 ideal things?
I would certainly want the manager to take the lead. I would want them to be guiding everybody in the team, including me, so that we're all pointing in the same direction and that we're not clashing in how we're presenting the artist and the branding and where we're going with it, and that we're all on the same road together. And you know, the manager should be directing that process. But obviously it's all about having a really good relationship, liking each other, you know, talking a lot, really, really good communication, you know, that happens like that. You know, people are getting back to you quickly, and everybody is enjoying the process of moving this career forward and excited about it. So communication is absolutely key, but I think liking somebody is really key as well.
Life's too short to work with arseholes, as somebody once told me.
Fairly blunt, Kerry.
I know, sorry. I think we're amongst
so true,
friends
though. Yes.
So, but you feel that the manager should definitely be driving the agenda.
Yeah, and I would definitely, you know, I'd want to see in a manager that kind of vision, that, you know, that not just where the artist is now, but definitely where they're going to be in 2 or 3 years' time, and to be ambitious about that, and to see a route through, because that's certainly when I take on artists as an agent, I won't take on anybody unless I can see the future. and see the potential in that. And I definitely want to see that in a manager and agree with them on it and go, yeah, I can put something into that. I can make that work. If you're going in that direction, I know exactly the venues we should go to and promoters, and and why don't we work with this PR person because they know how to do that. I'd love it to be that kind of group dynamic.
So actually what you're talking about is you're almost sort of taking on a partly managerial role as well, because you as an agent, you're bringing your vision into it as well as presumably. So if the manager is driving it in terms of driving forward the artist's career, the branding has been decided in collaboration with the artist, obviously, because that's what we're working with. But do you see the agent ideally having really strong and directional input into the plan?
I wouldn't necessarily expect a manager to say, Terry, I want you to book these gigs at this time of year, and then I want us to play these festivals, and then next year I want us to do this. I think the best way to work with an agent is to say, this is where we're heading, this is what we want to do, these are the kinds of venues that we can play. But obviously an agent should be bringing agency expertise to the table, and you want to take advantage of that. They know more about touring and venues and promoters and ticket prices and deals and all the rest of it than probably the manager knows. So you respect that expertise, you give them guidance, and then you wait for them to tell you, yeah, I know just what to do, we'll do this, this and this will work, this will get you to where you're going. So you're having respect for the people that you work with.
And do you find yourself often having to explain how deals work to managers, perhaps in the early days? Do you find yourself having to educate people, or are you finding that most of the managers that you're talking to, and I realize that this does change over time, do you find that most managers are coming to you being relatively well educated about things?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you get to the point where you're managing an artist, you've got to know something about what you're doing. Obviously, there are some people who are, coming in relatively early, and you are sharing knowledge with them and coming along with them. But on the whole, most of the managers are very well aware of that. I'm more likely to be having to explain deal structures to somebody who runs a folk club than I am to a manager.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point, because you're dealing with venues that, from kind of presumably round about, if you're putting somebody into a really small folk club on a first tour, I mean, I take it you probably wouldn't be working with somebody on their first tour, but you're presumably talking about venues which might be kind of 40 cap all the way up to, whatever that, what's the biggest cap venues that you tend to work with your artists?
About 1,000.
Yeah, so that's a huge range of sizes of venues, types of artists, types of audiences, and presumably experience of the people who are running those venues.
Yeah, and they all need a totally different approach and a different way of speaking to them. It's I had a folk club come through this afternoon going, yeah, we'll do that date, I'll talk to you nearer the time about details. and then at the same time, I've got big studios in Norfolk that have also booked this afternoon, who've already got the contract back to me an hour and a half later. So it's it's totally different, but you've got to adapt.
No, that's interesting. I think possibly you as an agent working with folk artists, you possibly cover the broadest range of venue sizes in terms of artist development.
Yeah, I think when we worked in mainstream music, you might just have one promoter across the whole tour, and really you're just talking to that promoter, and it's SJM or somebody like that who, absolutely know what they're doing, and there's one conversation about the tour, and then they go off and book it. It's totally different when you have to, take venues by the hand one by one. And that is one of the challenges of the genre that we work in.
And do you often, if you're working with an artist who has got a manager, do you expect the manager to step in and do all the advancing and, you know, sorting everything out once you've booked and contracted the shows, or do you expect to have to do some of the advancing?
The way it's developed with me is that I now do quite a lot of the advancing at the point that we contract, just for efficiency's sake. But then I don't advance the tours, because most of the tours that I'm doing, they're sort of getting a bit on the, you know, bigger side of, you know, they're moving to sort of 300, 400, 500 capacity. And at that point, I expect them to have a tour manager. And that tour manager will advance, and I will work with the tour manager to give them the contact details and point them in the direction of who they need to talk to. And I might get copied in on things so as I can make sure that nothing's getting missed. But I don't expect to do the advancing because it's not the best use of my time.
That kind of leads on to a question that Henning has just put in the comments, and that how about promoting themselves, and which I think is a really good topic to look at. But in terms of live, would you as the agent look at making suggestions to the manager or to the artist as to how best to promote the tour, or would you just step back and say, well, actually that's not my area?
As somebody who's worked right from the bottom up in this world and who has done some management, I tend to sort of want to get involved in those conversations, because I want to make sure that the tour that I've booked is a success, because that works for everybody. So if I know something that will help, I want to offer that in. But sometimes you don't get listened to. You know, I don't expect every suggestion to be taken up, but you know, when you try and explain to somebody, you know, a reason why playing a really vast range of venues that all say different things is not going to help your artist, and therefore you need to pick and choose the venues, and just randomly taking every offer that comes in is not necessarily the right way to play it. You know, that you want people to listen to you when you say these things, because you know what you're talking about. But if they don't, you might find that in a couple of years' time, you're probably not working together.
Yeah. I've just seen a comment in the chat. Somebody, I used the term advancing and I didn't explain that. So could you just explain what we mean by advancing?
Yeah, advancing would be the sort of the last minute details. You know, I might have arranged a get-in time and a sound check time at the point that I contract the show. But, you know, the advancing is going back to the venue, going back to whoever's doing front of house or you know, event management, and saying, right, can we check the get-in time? Have you definitely got the PA in place? Is it meeting our tech spec? You know, who's the engineer? Can we have a contact detail? Where's the parking? You know, what's the get out time? What's the arrangement for merch? Can we have the table here or not there? It's all of those things that happen on the day.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that was a great explanation. So given that a lot of us who are working with we're doing our own booking for our artists, but we'd really rather not, because there are people out there who are much better at it than we are. When is, for you as an agent, when is the right time for a manager to come to you with an artist?
Okay, I've actually created a little bit of a document that Michelle's going to send out to everybody who's on the call afterwards, which is giving a little rundown of you know, my thoughts on this. I'm sure they're not comprehensive, but it just, as I was trying to sort of download my brain, I kind of thought about this a little bit, and I think that there are a few things that I would say. What's very frustrating for an agent is if an artist who's really talented comes in at the point where they're releasing their debut album in 2 weeks' time, because at that point you can't put in that very special tour that's going with that very special album release, and a debut album will never come around again. So I'd say that, you know, if you're talking to an agent, go and talk to them at the beginning of an album cycle, at the point where the new writing is starting, things haven't really got going, because it's going to take them 18 months to book that tour, to get it right, so it's not a last minute tour. So you've got to give them time, because the timelines in folk and global are a lot longer than they are in rock and pop, where, you know, smaller shows in rock and pop, you can sometimes book 3 or 4 months in advance. You generally can't do that in folk and global, certainly in the UK. You need an 18-month lead time, and that's pretty much an album cycle. So I would personally want them to have done some level of national touring and prove that there's some audience out there. It's very difficult to take somebody from absolutely nowhere. It's a very long journey. You want them to have been on that journey a little bit and to prove that somebody is interested in listening to their music. So, you know, I would say that if they're doing, you know, 60, 80 to 100 tickets a night, not just in their hometown, I want to see that at points across the country, then that makes me think something's happening. Maybe an agent coming in at this point can move it forward. What else were we thinking? Team members, really important. You know, that if they've got a label, a manager, a PR person, a tour manager, you know, a friend with talent who will, you know, manage their distribution or whatever it is, you know, all of anybody who is in with bringing expertise from somewhere else that can be part of the team and move it forward. You kind of want to have at least somebody else on board with everything. I would also say that they have to have a really good online presence at the point that you take them on. You don't want to be starting to undo a bad online presence as the first thing that you do when you take somebody on.
That's a manager's job.
That's assuming there's not a manager, and if there is a manager, they should have been on that beforehand. So, and I'd like to know that, you know, at the point where you have the first conversation with the agent, you say with the artist, and you say, you know, who do you think you are? Where do you sit in the genre, in the market as a whole, and where are you going? And what are your ambitions? I want them to have answers to those questions, and even to see some sign that they're moving towards those things because they're really clear about what they want.
In other words, they book their own shows up until this point, or the managers book the shows, so that there's already a sense that the artist has got forward momentum.
But I want to see that they're making choices. They're not just booking shows. They're making choices about where those shows are. And there's a reason why they're making those choices. And those choices go with their choice of label, their choice of PR, you know, everything else, that it all fits within the same plan, and that there is a plan. It's not just, oh, we just want some shows, because I have had that conversation with people when I've said to them, you know, what would you like out of an agent? And they said, we'd like 2 shows a year and a couple of festivals, please. And that's not the right answer.
Yeah. No, I think that's really, really helpful to a lot of people, because, you know, and I've been in a situation where I think I really want somebody else to be booking these shows for me, but when I look at what I'm asking for, actually I can see that it's not really of any particular interest to an agent, because either the guarantees aren't there, or the artist doesn't want to have a long-term touring career. You know, it's not something that they specifically are looking for, or they might not be looking in that market. You know, they may have a perfectly good market in America, say, and are not interested in actually building up a live touring circuit in the UK. So I get that completely. Yeah,
and I'd be very careful about approaching agents and saying, I've been booking the touring, but, you know, I'm really too busy to do it now. I think I want somebody else to do it. Will you do it? Because that's not respectful of the talent and, you know, expertise and experience that they can bring to the table. You need to be respectful of that and acknowledge that they can do something that you probably can't.
Yeah, so it's about expanding the team at the right point that team needs to be expanded with other experts coming in. Yeah. After all, I can look through a contract and I can tell whether it's a bit dodgy, but I can't necessarily negotiate the finer points of that contract because I'm not a lawyer. So I need an expert to come in and do a good job.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
We have very interesting questions in the chat, if you don't mind me reading for you. Or if Adele, would you like to ask the question yourself?
Sure. Hi.
Hello.
So I have I've tried to get on support slots for artists that are very close to my artist, and we share the same audience. And in both occasions, the person, the booking agent, has asked, how many seats can you guarantee in each of these markets? Well, if you've never played these markets before, I'm caught out. I don't know how to answer that question.
The answer is none, probably. You know, if you haven't played that market before, you can't say we have got an audience of 30 or 70 or 200 in that market, and you need to be honest about it and understand why they're asking that question. Because,
yeah.
Sorry, go on.
No, I know they're asking that question because they're under pressure themselves to make sure that they're selling out, and they want to make sure that whoever they're bringing on can attract an audience to help sell those tickets. So I understand the point of it. I guess my frustration is that I feel like it's a catch-22. How do you play a market if if you've never played the market, you've never played them. And I am honest with them about it, but it is a little frustrating.
I understand, but that is not the only way to build a market. You know, to build an audience in a market, that to go in and do a support slot, that's not the only way. You know, there are small stages at festivals that, you know, and there are very small clubs where you can start. And if you do your promotion, do your socials, talk to your fans, all of that, you can start with your 30 or 40 capacity venue and work your way up. And when you get to your 80 or 100 people in that market, then go and talk to those tours that are looking for support acts and say, well, I can probably deliver you 100 tickets. And at that point, you'll probably get a better result.
Yeah, I mean, from a promotions point of view, the artist and myself we're for want of a better word, we're beasts when it comes to promotion, absolute beasts. And so we're honed in on the numbers. We know how many we have from a streaming point in each market. We know how many on our bands and towns follows us in these markets. We do geographically targeted advertising and pushes on bands in town. So, I mean, we're doing what we can to massage key markets, particularly in the UK. But it's
and those numbers are going to be of interest to those promoters of those headline tours. So you can certainly bring those to the table when you have that conversation about whether your artist is the right support for their artist. You know, those numbers, you know, people take note of them. So from my point of view, unless you've got people through the door and prove that they can sell tickets, you know, you're not in the strongest position. But the numbers still mean something.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Wait, I'm just looking through the list because that was a really useful question, Adele. I think that was. So I'm just looking through the list to see other questions that have come up. Somebody has said you mentioned about bad online presence, Terry. What did you mean about bad online presence?
Well, it's not, you know, always something that you can control, but I was recently approached by a band who have got a lot of promise, but when I went online and looked at the videos, which weren't the videos that they sent me because I do my research, some of them, you know, this was a harmony group, and some of the harmonies were just really ropey, and they didn't work. And it's like, well, why did you leave that video up there? Surely you should have taken that down. You know, and it's about, you know, what does your website look like? Does it look contemporary? Does it look new and fresh, or does it look like somebody did it on a Wix package? You know, it really matters. Those things really matter. They project professionalism.
So in other words, when you take on an artist, you expect them to have curated their presence, to have come up with a strong brand and make sure that there's nothing out there, as far as they can, that contradicts the brand that they're working hard to build.
It would be very nice if they had done that before they started talking to me. That is not always the case. And if it hasn't been done, there is a big conversation to be had about it. And often you're then in a situation where you're trying to persuade them that it's important, and why haven't they thought about this before? And that always puts you on the back foot, because you're the one then pushing for change, which really shouldn't be the case for an agent. It should be the manager that is pushing for that change.
I'm not sure how much time we've got. Michelle is the watch.
We have one more question from Marina. Roberta, if you would like to unmute yourself and ask a question.
Hi, I'm Marina.
Hello.
From Spain, and my question was about, because you talked about like the venues or the experience in the market, and what about when you work with foreign bands that had experience in some other international markets? Do you check, I don't know, the venues where they play, or how?
Yeah. I would look at an artist's full career history at the point where I judge whether I'm the right agent for them and that's the right time. Obviously, it's a little bit more difficult with territories that you don't know well. I don't know the Spanish market very well, so I'd have to do an awful lot of research to get to the bottom of that, and probably ring a few of my contacts out there and try and get a sense of what those venues are like and what playing them means.
And also, do you look some other territories where they play abroad, or you mainly look at their origin country? Or
I look at everything.
Everything.
Thank you so much.
No worries.
Thank you, Terry, for your insights. I'm sure we can spend 2 more hours just with you. Thank you so much, Kerry, as well, for moderating the conversation. And thank you everyone for attending our first Global Folk Managers Meetup, and we hope to see you in the next one. Thank you so much.